Hello everybody and welcome back to OMB Reviews. I am the critic who is a cynic. Hope you're doing well, and today we're doing a box office preview for this upcoming weekend, which is expected to be a pretty good domestic weekend for Superman, James Gunn's Superman, of course, and it also is expected to be a pretty good weekend for the Jurassic World Rebirth movie, which for some reason people are still indeed going to see. Again, people I guess will like what they like, but we also have, of course, some new movies coming out. I Know What You Did Last Summer, which apparently I've seen some reporting and some reviews mentioned that apparently the name is I Will Always Know What You Did Last Summer, or there is some change or variation. I've never seen that before, but hey, it's that era of remakes, reboots, things that are just unoriginal in today's world. That is the era of filmmaking, and that's also why we're getting a Smurfs movie. That's right. There's a new Smurfs film coming out today as well, getting very, very little publicity, I would actually argue, as it is like one of the first times I've ever actually even heard the film is being released. I had known that it was being set up. I'd seen trailers for it maybe last year, but kind of crazy that it's just coming out of the blue like this, and, you know, no pun intended. And it looks like the box office is going to reflect that very fact as well, with the film not expected to make that much money in its opening weekend domestically. And of course, we also have the A24 film Eddington, which I've heard is a bit of a hot mess, which again, from that director makes a lot of sense to me, but I imagine some of your A24 purists out there, or other people that are fan of his direction, might end up liking that movie. But we're talking about the numbers here today, so we'll do a bit of a preview and, of course, also a recap, because there was a lot of big box office news that happened this week, including some craziness going on with the site thenumbers.com. As you all know, I use thenumbers.com every single week. I switched away from Box Office Mojo a long time ago because Box Office Mojo always takes the longest to update their numbers, but also they have had history in the past. They've really let the ball down, having a lot of data entry issues where numbers are not actually being reported correctly, so much so that even big names like John Campea ran with some of the fake numbers that they had put on there at one point in their time. Well, the numbers had a bit of a situation like that earlier this week, with Wednesday itself being a day where they updated the international numbers for Superman, and the internationals jumped all the way up to about $130 to $150 million. And you had all of these X handles, all of these Twitter handles, all these social media profiles running with the story about, oh, look at how amazing James Gunn Superman is actually doing. Look, it is actually doing well internationally. Now, anyone with half a brain would have been able to look at that and say, well, you know what? Doesn't really make sense for them to update those internationals on a Wednesday, let alone for those internationals to add that much money. Especially when every other site, every other trade publication is reporting the same exact $95 million international figure. Does not make a whole lot of sense. And yet, it took much longer than what it needed to be. A lot of people still bought it hook, line, and sinker. And of course, what happened? The numbers eventually updated. They also randomly, this is the other bit of news, just recapping the week, they also randomly updated the numbers.com, their Lilo and Stitch numbers. So the other news story that was going around the other day was, oh, look, Lilo and Stitch finally crosses $1 billion at the global box office. The issue, of course, was domestically, it had not yet gotten to that point. It was still reporting at $995, $996. And with the domestic numbers daily coming in for this movie being under $1 million, when all of a sudden the news came out of, oh, it's crossed $1 billion, I started to scratch my head and say, mathematically, that's impossible. It's making less than $1 million a day here domestically. They don't update their internationals until Sunday. What's going on? Well, what they decided to do over at thenumbers.com, and maybe they've done this before. I've never seen them do this personally, though, as far as the length that I've been tracking the site. They decided to update their internationals just for Lilo and Stitch, because what the interesting thing is that though Lilo and Stitch's internationals updated and crossed at $1 billion, guess what? If you look over at the Superman movie, that movie was still caught. Again, this is actually that old metric here, but as you can see, $95 million is still being reported. So again, this is kind of the environment we're working with here. So numbers.com, you're driving me crazy with this stuff because, one, you have that data entry issue. That does happen, of course, but it took you way too long to update those numbers. And then, of course, now you're just randomly updating certain movies. So you're like, oh, Lilo and Stitch, yeah, technically they would have crossed $1 billion here because even though we haven't gotten some official reporting yet, let's just put the numbers in there is kind of what it seems like at this point. Because if you're going to do that for that movie, you should do it for every movie. Because, man, I would love to have daily updates on international figures for all the films, because that would make my job that much easier. But anyway, I'm just going to call out, my rant is over here, thenumbers.com. Get your crap together. Let's go over to Box Office Theory and talk about what the projections are for this weekend, though. Superman 2025 right now is projected to make $56.7 million this upcoming weekend. That is a 55% drop from last weekend, according to Box Office Theory. Now, that is actually towards the lower end of estimates. So his range on the film's second weekend is between $53 and $62 million. Many in the mainstream media are running with a $60 million second weekend, where this film is expected to have a pretty strong hold. So basically what we have going on for Superman is a bit of good news, bad news. So the good news is that the film seems to be doing pretty well domestically. And a very good Monday, a very good Tuesday, and really every day this week, it has been doing very, very well. And that's obviously a good sign, because you get much more money back in the domestic market than you do internationally. The big issue, and I think the big Achilles heel of this film, is going to still be the fact that internationally, this movie is just not playing. As we mentioned last weekend, it only made $95 million last weekend, and even though some people thought that the adjusted numbers had been brought in, and the adjusted numbers had brought it over $100 million in its opening frame, that actually did not end up happening. That was all fake, right? That was all an accounting error, as it were. Now, we can't really expect, and really aren't expecting, much difference here this coming weekend with the internationals for Superman, so expect the good news to be still right, has a strong hold in that 50 to 60% range. For a movie like this, that's actually a very good hold. It shows you that you not only had a lot of people showing up your opening weekend, but a lot of holdover from that time as well. You have people going to see it 2 or 3 times. You have people who are maybe waiting for the second weekend, for the crowds to die down a little bit to actually go and see the movie too. That's what that kind of number indicates. Normally for Marvel MCU movies, we see drops in the upper 60s. Sometimes we see it in even the 70s, and I think we've seen it as high as in the 80s for other films in the past. And so this is actually a very good number for a big film like this domestically. The big question, of course, is going to be where those internationals fall. This film got a full release, a full international slate release last weekend, and because of that, we're not expecting a whole lot of differences there, and so we can expect, hey, that number domestically is still going to be a lot higher than the number internationally, right? Just to give a comparison here, $166 million after a $125 million opening weekend, by the way, so it's added quite a bit domestically. It's probably going to hit 250 by the end of this weekend if you know, if we're looking at these numbers here, or at the very least be in that 225 to 250 range domestically. Internationally, though, look at how much less. It's made almost double the amount of money domestically than internationally. And again, those international numbers will update this coming weekend, and by Sunday we'll have those numbers, and of course we do expect those numbers to tighten a bit. But when you have a movie like this that's doing that much better domestically than internationally, let's just say your chances of $1 billion are basically none. Your chances of getting $800+ million are essentially none, right? Because you're just not tracking well enough in those other markets to get your total global box office to that level. So again, we'll make some official projections when we get the official 2 weeks in. That's right now, I think, where the film currently stands is, hey, doing much better domestically, has a huge international problem, though, and that could end up hurting its bottom line in the long run. We'll have the full breakdown on Sunday. Going back to Box Office Theory, Jurassic World Rebirth is also hanging around a 44% hold there. Only been out for a few weeks now, so that film still very much overperforming for its quality, because it doesn't really have any. I Know What You Did Last Summer from Sony, or I Always Know What You Did Last Summer, whatever the official title actually is, $15 million as a new release. This film cost a very little amount of money to make, and so that's not a terrible opening, but still has to do probably a little bit better in order to make its money back theatrically at the very least. Sony is in a lucky position because they'll be able to sell the rights to this on streaming and easily make their money back whether they make anything theatrically or not. The new Smurfs film from Paramount cost about $58 million to make, so that's a very low number for an animated movie, but it also is only going to make $9.9 million as a brand new animated feature. Just goes to show you that, yeah, audiences aren't really caring about the Smurfs. I don't know why they're rebooting it as much. Yeah, the Smurfs was a great cartoon when I was growing up, but every single remake and every single adaptation honestly has made me scratch my head to say, is there really an audience for the Smurfs? I think they're trying to make the Smurfs almost like the Minions to a certain extent, and it just does not work in the same exact way. So maybe this will be the sign to them, hey, we should stop making these Smurfs movies, but you never know. F1 expected to drop 29%, How to Train Your Dragon 29%, so all still holding well there. How to Train Your Dragon is also going to be ahead of the new A24 release this weekend of Eddington, expected to only make $5.3 million. Again, that sounds about right for an A24 release, and so whether that's good or bad or not, it's like, it's A24, so it's really hard to say at this point in time. Going over to Box Office Pro, leaving those numbers over there, they are also being a little bit, a little bit more cautious, I think, on what their expectations are. They're only projecting a $45 to $55 million domestic take. And I think a lot of that's to do with the fact that, yeah, the word of mouth on the film has been good. The daily box office seems to also have been pretty healthy as well. You do have a lot of films coming out this weekend. As you all know, I'm not a big fan of the whole adage of, competition can affect your numbers in any realistic or significant way, right? The way I see it is that if you want to see a movie, you're going to see a movie. You're not going to say, I can only see one of these movies that I really want to see. Now, if you really want to see a movie, and multiple films at that, you'll go to see both of those films. So it has some impact, but again, I don't think significant enough to really make that much of a difference. That being said, again, I would always be on the lower end of these things in general, just because I also know that there's a lot of people that don't like this movie. It honestly is amazing to see the two audiences, because there's one audience that is just passionately, almost toxically defending the movie at the point of attacking anyone that's critical of it in any single way. And then you have other people that are so hateful of this movie that they're doing almost the same thing for anyone who says a nice thing about the film. That's why I think it's better to be in the middle with this one, because objectively speaking, there's a lot of flaws with this movie. David Cornsweet is not one of them. He's actually one of the best parts of the film, and his interviews outside of the film also have been really, really good. He obviously, I think, is a very good actor to kind of represent the brand, but in many ways it almost reminds me of that Superman Returns mentality, where it's like, yeah, Brandon Routh was a great person and seemed to be a kind of a good standard bearer of that character, but was in a very bad to mediocre movie, right? That's kind of where I feel like he's in here. Obviously, some people may not agree with that comparison to say that one is better than the other, but I do think that he is better than the movie itself that he is in. I think he deserved a much better film in the long run. Jurassic World Rebirth here, $18 to $22 million. Again, still expected to have the number 2 spot. And then they're projecting a battle for third place to be I Know What You Did Last Summer and the Smurfs movie. So interesting that there is their number 3 and 4 position. Again, very similar to what we have going on here, though Box Office Theory does not think that there's much competition coming from Smurfs. I would probably agree with Theory there. And then lastly, we have Box Office Report saying $60.5 million is their projected opening or second weekend numbers for Superman. So there'd be a 52% hold from last week. So again, a lot of these guys projecting in that 50 to 60% range. I think that sounds about right. Rebirth at 47%, and then I Know What You Did Last Summer and Smurfs. So very similar numbers there, giving a little bit more to Smurfs there than Box Office Theory, but overall still looking pretty good. Now, of course, the media is going to continue to do what the media does, which is spin numbers, create fake stories and fake narratives and everything. And again, that's not really a commentary on the movie itself. What we can say, though, is that, yeah, there is good news domestically going on currently for Superman. There just really isn't any good international news going on for this movie. And so will we see the same exact thing happen this weekend? Yeah, we'll have to wait and see on that one. It is also nice to see that at the very least the animation style for the upcoming Smurfs film doesn't look like the eyesores that the live action / animated adaptation looked like just even a few years ago. Some other box office news, pretty amazing stuff here. So apparently the Odyssey from Christopher Nolan had put its 70mm IMAX tickets on sale from Regal and IMAX, or rather from Regal and AMC, a year out from its release, and it's selling out. That's right, a film that's a year out from its release is already selling out. That shows you kind of the power that not only do these premium format screens have, but more importantly, the power that Christopher Nolan has. Christopher Nolan has a huge fan base that was willing to spend a lot of money on movies like this, and so, hey, kudos to him for doing something that I don't think I've ever seen as far as putting a movie out a year before its release, putting at least the ticket sales out a year before its release. It's also a lot of faith in those theaters that they will still be around, because as we all know, though things are better over the summertime for these theaters, in general, moviegoing is still dropping quite a bit. Lilo and Stitch did officially cross $1 billion again, because the numbers went against its typical standards for how they update their movies. But again, it was already known it was going to cross $1 billion this weekend anyway, as I was mentioning last weekend. And so, hey, congratulations for them being the first film to reach that number. Some people might try to bring up that film from China. I'm sorry, but I'm just not buying into, and again, this is not a conspiracy theory. It's just that I don't really trust box office numbers from China in general. I'm definitely not going to subscribe to the idea that a Chinese movie released in China made almost $2 billion in China alone. Again, I'm not saying anything against the movie there, but I'm just saying I don't trust those figures. And so, again, I don't trust Hollywood either. People usually bring that point up, but guess what? I trust the Hollywood reporting much more than I do China, because guess what? There are third-party people that are reporting a lot of the figures that come out of the studios here in America cannot say the same thing happening in China. That's a huge difference there, and I think that makes all the difference in the world. I digress, of course. Going into some of the budgets here, though, And then lastly, looking at where the films that are currently out still stand. Obviously, we have here I Know What You Did Last Summer, only $18 million budget there, so a break even of roughly $54 million. It might be able to get there, but it's, again, Sony film, so it'll be okay because it'll be able to sell the rights later on. Smurfs needs to make around $174 million to break even based off a $58 million budget. That one's going to be a little bit tougher to be able to accomplish, right? When it comes to a film like Smurfs, that's from Paramount. They have Paramount TV Plus, and so unless they are going to go ahead and try to sell the rights to stream that movie elsewhere, that could end up hurting the film in the long run. And then from A24, $75 million is the break even for Eddington, which, based on its opening weekend, doesn't seem very likely. Again, A24 also kind of follows its own, follows the beat of its own drum in many ways. But it's very interesting to see what will happen with that movie. Some of the current numbers as we see. So as of the last update, James Gunn Superman has reached $261 million. That's around $200 million in the red at this same point of release. I do think it'll probably, by the end of this weekend, be at the very least at $100 to $150 million in the red. So what that means is I do think there's a good chance for Superman to break even. Of course, that depends on what production budget you actually buy into. Do you buy into the $300+ million one that they reported on a tax filing? Again, you can try to argue of, they were just trying to get as much money as they could. Yeah, that would still be lying on a tax form. If you're off by $100 million in your projected cost, I'm sorry. I don't see how that's not fraud. I don't see how and why they would ever publicly also do that, where you could easily access a file like it. But anyway, I do think that the probably cost of the film is over $250 million when you take all the tax credits and stuff into account. That being said, it still, I do think, is going to be probably a film that makes over $600 million, at least at this point. Seems like that is at least a possibility. And it's mostly going to be because of those strong domestic showings. Now, of course, it has only one more weekend, this coming weekend, right? To be able to go up against basically no competition. Its only competition is really Jurassic World Rebirth, which is a much bigger problem for Superman internationally because people are gobbling up Rebirth internationally versus domestically. But the problem is that Rebirth's also not doing too shabby domestically either, right? That film with the cost of that filming around, $180-ish million? Yeah, $180 million is the report there. Is actually almost at the point of breaking even. So this film, $564 million for Rebirth at this point, it's going to hit its break-even point and start making profit, in fact, this coming weekend. So again, no surprise there for me. The question really is, where does that film end? I think as of right now with the current tracking, $800 to $900 million sounds about right to me. Superman, again, still too early to tell, but we could probably expect it to be probably at least $600 million, if not more. And what that means is that, Rebirth is going to, I think, absolutely win the summertime battle with Superman. And then the question is, where does Fantastic Four end up? Now, there's been a lot of talk about what Fantastic Four is going to do. Based on what we're seeing currently with Jurassic World Rebirth and Superman, I do think this could be an early sign, meaning I would not be surprised if Fantastic Four does a lot worse than Superman does domestically, right? Unless it gets a similar word of mouth, similar reception, which based off of Disney's track record, the MCU's most recent track record, and the last few movies, I don't think it's going to happen to that same degree, to that same level. And so therefore, I think you could see Superman doing much better than that film domestically. But internationally, that is where I do think Disney and the MCU still have a bit of a stranglehold in many ways, right? Obviously, they've lost a lot of influence over the years, but they still do, again, pretty good numbers over internationally. And so it'd be interesting to see whether or not Fantastic Four is able to beat Superman internationally, start to track and trend better over there, and anything it might lack domestically, maybe even make that up in the long run internationally. And again, where does that film end up? Those last two movies they had, right? Thunderbolts and Guardians of the Galaxy, Thunderbolts and Captain America: Brave New World. Neither of them were able to get that much past $400 million. In fact, Thunderbolts didn't even reach $400 million globally. So again, that's kind of the standard. $400 to $500 million sounds about right to me, at least at this point. If the film falls off, that number will go down. If the film exceeds expectations, then that projection will go up. But as of right now, it's a very interesting battle to say at the very least, and much of it, of course, is focused on James Gunn Superman. So what are y'all's thoughts? There are 3 new movies coming out this weekend. Are you planning to see I Know What You Did Last Summer, Smurfs, or Eddington? Again, none of those really seem to have any, do not create any desire to see a film, at least for me. And what are y'all's thoughts about the whole Superman stuff? And also the thoughts on the numbers debacle, right? Again, the fact that they are putting the data entries in there, letting that run for a good 14 plus hours before they finally fix it, even though anyone, again, who follows these numbers could have been able to tell, oh yeah, this is clearly a clerical error because those numbers don't make any sense. It didn't make any common sense whatsoever. Also, the thought on them randomly updating their internationals just so that they could push Lilo and Stitch over the edge at $1 billion earlier than the weekend tracking, which would have done that anyway, but again, gives them their headline. That is really what all this business is about, it seems, these days anyway. So let me know your thoughts about those things and anything else I mentioned in the comment section down below. If you like that, if you like the video, smash the like button, smash the rumble button as well. You guys are all amazing and beautiful people. Have a wonderful rest of your day, a blessed Friday, and as always, God bless. And now for a huge special shout out to all of my Chosen of Valhalla members, starting off first with my people on Patreon, Father Luca Illick and Miss Martin Muses. Check out her YouTube channel by the same name, Miss Martin Muses. Also to my Subscribestar people, Matt317. Check out his Twitch channel by the same name, Matt317. And lastly to my YouTube member, Mr. Roy. Shout out to you, good sir. And if you want your name shouted out at the end of every live stream and video, check out the top link in the video description below where you get access to that. Also, you get access to a plethora of other things. You get your name listed at the end of every live stream and video, like you saw in those names that came up before this video started. And also access to a giveaways channel that I host over on the Discord server where I give away 4Ks, Steelbooks, Blu-rays, all kinds of stuff. So check that out if you're interested in that. Also, I have an exclusive podcast that I hold at least once a month, and it's always a good time, and you get extra bonus content with that also. So if any of that sounds interesting, again, check out that top link in the video description below. You guys are all amazing and beautiful people. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and as always, God bless.